Alright, so not only is Candace Owens' fact-checking lawsuit absolutely fascinating, it has nothing to do with the 2020 elections. Viva Frei, Montreal litigator turned YouTuber, and I finally got around to reading Candace Owens' lawsuit in detail, and it is thoroughly fascinating. It's sort of a mix between a defamation, tortious interference with contractual relations lawsuit. It is mind-blowing, and if you want to know truly how dirty big tech plays, this lawsuit is going to show you. The bottom line of the lawsuit is that Candace Owens and her company, Candace Owens LLC, is suing two companies, third-party fact-checkers for Facebook, but she is not suing Facebook itself. She is suing these third-party fact-checking companies for fact-checking that they did on two posts that she made on her Facebook page, which resulted in her Facebook page being demonetized and other damages that she alleges in the lawsuit. Not only that, but this lawsuit details what can only really be described as parasitic behavior by these third-party fact-checkers, in that they are literally sucking traffic away from Candace's hard-earned traffic on her Facebook page to their own articles. With that brief overview, let's go through the lawsuit, and I'm going to draw your attention to some of the highlights so that you can truly appreciate how reprehensible this behavior is by these third-party fact-checkers. In the Superior Court for the State of Delaware, Candace Owens, in her individual capacity, and Candace Owens LLC, a Delaware limited liability company, plaintiffs, versus Lead Stories LLC, a Colorado limited liability company, and Gannett Satellite Information Network LLC, doing business as USA Today, a Delaware limited liability company, defendants. It is worthwhile to note that Candace Owens is not suing Facebook itself. I don't know if that check is in the mail or they are not suing Facebook because of the 230 CDA immunity, but they are not suing Facebook for the time being. The introductory paragraphs do a good job summarizing the body of the lawsuit, so let's go over those before we really get into some of the nitty-gritty allegations in the lawsuit. Introduction. This action arises from the defendant's malicious publication of false, quote, fact-check, end quote, articles charging plaintiffs with spreading misinformation about the COVID-19 pandemic on the internet in, quote, an attempt to downplay the severity, end quote, of the pandemic. The defendants wrongfully leveraged their power as Facebook third-party fact-checking partners to place false or misleading information warning labels on plaintiffs' posts for the purpose of redirecting web traffic away from plaintiffs and directing it to their respective websites. By such a scheme, the defendants sought to increase their numbers of clicks and advertising revenue by commandeering plaintiffs' large Facebook following, enhance their status on the internet, and enhance their relationship with Facebook as third-party fact-checking partners. The content published by plaintiffs alleged below is not, quote, obscene, lewd, lascivious, filthy, excessively violent, harassing, or otherwise objectionable, end quote, within the meaning of Section 230 of the Communications Decency Act, Section 230, and the defendants and Facebook did not censor plaintiffs' content in good faith. Defendants' third-party fact-checking agreement with Facebook is void against public policy because it allows defendants to censor speech that does not fall within the specific categories of content enumerated in Section 230. The lawsuit then goes on to describe who Candace Owens is as an individual. She's a conservative, a pro-Trump individual, an author. She's got over 4 million followers on Facebook, over 2.6 million followers on Twitter, but as the lawsuit alleges, that popularity comes with a certain price, and I'm going to read two paragraphs in particular. Candace's popular social media posts reveal her opinions on the state of Black America, the Democratic and Republican parties, and her support for President Donald Trump. But her popularity does not come without opposition. Facebook employees, motivated by hostility towards Candace's conservative political viewpoint and open support of President Trump, have maliciously and falsely labeled her a, quote, hate agent and actively attempt to limit her use of Facebook's platform. Nevertheless, Candace takes pride in her social media posts and is often a last bastion for truth in an online world of misinformation. Candace is popular and economically successful in her trade as a political commentator because her posts are meticulously researched, carefully argued, and strive to be accurate and truthful. Her followers recognize her as a champion of truth and continue to follow her because she is truthful and courageous in her social media posts. The lawsuit then goes on to describe what her company is, and it is basically a pass-through company totally owned and controlled by Candace Owens herself, and it bears the name of Candace Owens LLC Limited Liability Company. In order to show its legal standing and its claim for damages in the lawsuit alleges as follows as relates to Candace Owens LLC. Candace Owens LLC derives significant revenue from its posts on various social media websites, including Facebook, through advertising. Candace Owens LLC has a contract with Facebook that allows Candace Owens LLC to publish content on Facebook. In return, the contract provides that Candace Owens LLC will be compensated by Facebook and its network of advertisers. On June 22, 2020, Facebook demonetized Candace Owens LLC, suspending its ability to derive revenue from Facebook. As a proximate consequence of defendants' actions actions as alleged herein, and to the date of filing this complaint, Candace Owens LLC remains demonetized and unable to derive revenue from Facebook. As we are going to see, it's not just that Candace Owens and Candace Owens LLC were demonetized on Facebook as a result of the fact-checking articles written by these third-party fact-checkers. It's that these third-party fact-checkers are in fact now trying to siphon traffic away from Candace Owens' own Facebook page to their own articles. But I'm getting ahead of myself. First, let's go and see who these third-party if I say that one more time, let's just go see who these third-party fact-checkers are. Lead Stories has its own independent website at leadstories.com, which is where it publishes its, quote, fact-check articles. Lead Stories is a, quote, Facebook third-party fact-checking partner as it is defined by Facebook. Upon information and belief, Lead Stories is paid by Facebook to publish a certain amount of, quote, fact-check, end quote, articles that analyze whether certain Facebook posts contain truthful information or not.
Now get this.
Lead Stories is a signatory to the International Fact-Checking Network, IFCN, which is a unit of the Poynter Institute of Media Studies that promulgates a, quote, code of principles, end quote, to promote, quote, excellence in fact-checking, end quote. One of the co-founders of Lead Stories is Alan Duke, who was a former editor of the cable news network CNN for 26 years. CNN is an organization with a provable political and journalistic bias in favor of the Democratic Party over the Republican Party. First of all, there is something to be said about slapping a label of authority on yourselves and declaring yourselves fact-checkers, but there is an international fact-checking network, and it is led by someone at CNN, led or founded by someone at CNN. That says a lot about the fact-checkers, and if these are the fact-checkers, who are going to fact-check the fact-checkers? I'm going straight to a Simpsons meme right now.
If you're the police, who will police the police?
I don't know. Coast Guard?
Now let's get to USA Today. USA Today is a member and, quote, partner, end quote, of Facebook's third-party fact-checking program as it is defined by Facebook. In this way, USA Today has an agreement with Facebook to publish fact-check articles on various Facebook and other internet posts. Upon information and belief, USA Today is paid by Facebook and possibly others to publish a certain amount of, quote, fact-check, end quote, articles that analyze whether certain Facebook posts contain truthful information or not. The lawsuit then goes into a number of allegations as relates to jurisdiction. Suffice to say, we only need to go over one of those allegations in order to determine that Delaware is the proper jurisdiction for the lawsuit. Lead Stories targeted a citizen of Delaware and caused reputational injury to be suffered in Delaware to a citizen of Delaware. In order to profit from redirecting Candace's visitors and to further its policy preferences and mute those it opposes, Lead Stories purposely and with malice targeted Candace personally and Candace Owens LLC by tortiously interfering with Candace and Candace Owens LLC's contractual relationship with Facebook and her and the LLC's prospective business relationships that stemmed from her successful and widely read Facebook posts and blog posts. The bottom line is that the tort was affected in Delaware, the prejudice was suffered in Delaware, hence Delaware is the proper jurisdiction. Now let's get into the Facebook posts themselves. Relevant social media posts. The first Facebook post. On March 29, 2020, Candace published a post via her Facebook page that outlined facts and her opinion surrounding the method US government officials were using to count the COVID-19 pandemic death toll. The, quote, first Facebook post, end quote. Mirroring an argument that had been made in numerous publications by numerous commentators and expert analysts, Candace's first Facebook post argued that government measures of cause of death overstated the extent and danger of the COVID-19 pandemic. Candace did not simply make an unsupported assertion that government officials were overstating COVID-19 fatalities. Her post cites to a research paper establishing this contention and described her personal research efforts on this topic and enlisted her readers' assistance in continuing her research project. Far from constituting a, quote, false, end quote, posting, which is how Lead Stories would describe it, plaintiff's post was thoughtful, sourced, researched, and clearly furthered the important discussion of the most significant ongoing national crisis in decades. For the purposes of this vlog, we don't really need to get into any more detail of the two Facebook posts. Suffice to say that Candace says her first Facebook post was substantially correct and labeling it as incorrect was a false fact check, and as relates to the second post, it was a matter of opinion, and to the extent that anyone took it as a matter of fact, in any event, it was substantially true. Wait until you see the fact check though. As a result of USA Today's article alleged later in this complaint, Facebook placed a false information warning label upon Candace's second Facebook post that blocks its viewability to readers as depicted below. Candace's second Facebook post was, quote, fact-checked, end quote, by USA Today because it desired to publish its own web link on her second Facebook post, hijacking her large following to obtain clicks and views on USA Today's own article. Just appreciate that for a moment. The fact checker is slapping a warning label on Candace Owens posts, whether you think it's right or wrong, true or false. They're slapping a warning label on her post and redirecting traffic from her Facebook page to their own article. In French law, there is the concept of the parasite, that is to say the animal that sucks the life out of its host, eventually killing its host and then moving on to another host. This is a form of parasitic behavior in that it is attempting to leech away from Candace Owens' own following to promote their own to the detriment of Candace Owens' following. I am not aware of whether or not the concept of parasitism exists in American law, but at the very least someone should know about it because it is a very interesting concept of French law. On April 1, 2020, Lead Stories published an article written by its reporter Ryan Cooper with the headline, quote, fact check. COVID-19 not being blamed for deaths primarily due to unrelated causes, end quote. Data soured, and I think that's supposed to say sourced, from Facebook's CrowdTangle web tool shows that the April 1 article was interacted with over 2,600 times on Facebook. On Lead Stories' website, as a link to the April 1 article, Lead Stories labeled a screenshot of Candace Owens' Facebook post with the words, quote, hoax alert, and, quote, false, as pictured below. These two statements are provably untrue because Candace's Facebook post was not a, quote, hoax, end quote, nor was it, quote, false, end quote. And then jumping back to USA's wrongful conduct, the lawsuit alleges as follows. On April 30, 2020, USA Today published an article on its website with the headline, quote, fact check, CDC has not stopped reporting flu deaths and this season's numbers are typical, end quote. The April 30 article. The April 30 article is false and references Candace's second Facebook post and identifies Candace specifically by name. The April 30 article was used by Facebook to place a false information warning label upon Candace's second Facebook post. When one clicks on the false information warning label, Facebook identifies USA Today as the entity who fact-checked Candace. Moreover, this allows one to be easily redirected to USA Today's website by clicking on the link that appears directly under the blue oval that states, quote, fact check, end quote, as depicted below. The April 30 article was wrongful and improper because USA Today intended that its article would be used by Facebook to place a false information warning label upon the second Facebook post so that traffic from Candace's page would be redirected to USA Today's webpage for USA Today's own financial gain. By redirecting plaintiffs' large following to USA Today's webpage, USA Today generates clicks and views that increase its advertising revenue. And therein lies the scheme and the patent conflict of interest of these so-called fact-checkers. They stand to financially gain from labeling someone else's article as fake and fact-checking it and redirecting to their own websites for their own increased ad revenue. It is diabolical in its parasitic, evil machinery.
It's very poetic.
The lawsuit then gets into the concrete damages that as a result of these fact-checking articles, it caused Facebook to demonetize Candace Owens' Facebook page from which she derived substantial revenue. The defendants' articles individually and collectively caused Facebook to restrict the viewability of plaintiffs' first and second Facebook posts through the use of false information warning labels. Moreover, the defendants' articles individually and collectively caused Facebook to demonetize plaintiffs by suspending their ability to derive revenue from Facebook. As Facebook third-party fact-checking partners that are signatories to the IFCN, the defendants knew that their respective articles would be used by Facebook to discredit plaintiffs through the publication of false information warning labels. Moreover, the defendants knew and were substantially certain that its articles would be used by Facebook as a justification to suspend plaintiffs' ability to derive revenue from Facebook. Candace Owens' demands for a retraction were largely ignored, surprise, surprise, except that USA Today did in fact change the title of at least one of their articles. Pursuant to the protocol established by Facebook for appealing the misinformation warning labels placed upon Facebook posts, Candace sent an email directly to Alan Duke, co-founder and a representative of Lead Stories, explaining to him why Lead Stories' article was incorrect and should be edited or removed from the internet. Instead of acknowledging Lead Stories' ironic failure to accurately fact-check its own baseless allegations concerning Candace, Mr. Duke merely changed Lead Stories' article rating of the Facebook post from, quote, false, end quote, to, quote, partly false, end quote. Yeah, their original assessment of qualifying it as false was itself false, but they changed it to being only mostly false, so they are only mostly false themselves.
Well, it just so happens that your friend here is only mostly dead. Mostly dead? He's slightly alive.
Now, as we have seen in previous vlogs, in particular the Oberlin defamation suit, when it comes to tortious interference with contractual relations, there has to be an underlying tort, and in this lawsuit, the underlying tort is defamation, which means that they have to allege actual malice because Candace Owens is necessarily a public figure. Lead Stories maliciously and falsely attacked plaintiffs for its own financial and political gain. Lead Stories stands to gain financially from its false attack on Candace. It profits from visitors being redirected from Candace's website and to its website and being exposed to Lead Stories advertisers and sponsors. Lead Stories also profits from its contractual relationship with Facebook and has an economic incentive to fulfill its contractual obligation with Facebook to locate and label falsehoods and hoaxes. By terming a prominent political commentator like Candace a liar who utters irresponsible falsehoods and conjures up hoaxes that impair the national interest, Lead Stories also advances its patent political or policy interest in promoting a leftist agenda and thwarting Candace's conservative agenda. Now, regardless of whether you agree or disagree with the second argument, the first argument is rather compelling. Lead Stories has a vested interest in slandering and labeling Candace as a liar, as someone who utters hoaxes, because it generates traffic to their own website, which increases their own ad revenue. And in any event, that is something of a sick conflict of interest in that Lead Stories will financially benefit from its labeling other people's stories as false. They can abuse of their privileged position as a fact-checking partner within Facebook to hijack the Facebook page of someone with over 4 million followers and redirect those people to their own website. If that is not parasitic, I don't know what is, and I have caught other fish with lampreys stuck to their torso sucking the blood from that other living fish.
Oh my gosh!
Look at the lamprey right here, guys. Okay.
Oh my gosh, that's what a lamprey is.
Yeah, we're gonna take it off.
Oh my
gosh, we just got the lamprey off.
Oh,
Look! Oh my gosh! Then we get into the causes of action, which I've already given you sort of the intro of, but let's go through them one by one. Causes of action. Count 1. Intentional interference with contractual relations. Brought by Candace Owens, LLC, against both defendants. Candace Owens, LLC, at all times relevant to this action, had a contract with Facebook pursuant to Facebook's terms of service that provided for, among other things, the ability for Candace Owens, LLC, to derive revenue from the Facebook platform. The defendants had actual knowledge of the contract between Candace Owens, LLC, and Facebook, given that, among other things, the defendants are Facebook third-party fact-checking partners and themselves under a contract with Facebook. Defendant Lead Stories committed an intentional act by publishing defamatory statements that it knew would be utilized by Facebook to justify banning Candace Owens LLC from deriving advertising revenue from the Facebook platform. Lead Stories' intentional act was improper and wrongful in that it constitutes a recognized tort, defamation, and because it intended to harm Candace Owens LLC out of political motivation. Count 2. Tortious interference with prospective business relations. Before the publication of defendants' articles, given Candace's prior success, it was reasonably probable and absolutely expected that plaintiffs would obtain future business opportunities and revenue derived from Facebook and other social media platforms. In fact, Lead Stories knew or should have known through the cover photo and profile picture of Candace Owens' Facebook account that Candace was advertising and encouraging pre-orders of her new book, Blackout. A copy of this cover photo describing the pre-sale, which is immediately viewable to all who access plaintiff's Facebook page, is depicted below. Lead Stories, through publication of its article, unreasonably and intentionally interfered with A. Plaintiff's opportunity to advertise and sell Candace's book through the use of Facebook and other social media platforms. B. Plaintiff's opportunity to maximize the amount of pre-sale orders for Candace's book. C. Plaintiff's opportunity to expand viewership of Candace's Facebook page and its accounts on other social media platforms. And D. Other opportunities for Candace to speak, teach, publish, comment, or engage in other activities that either immediately inured to plaintiff's financial gain or contributed to Candace's goodwill. The overriding idea here is that the defendants know or ought to have known that the plaintiffs, Candace Owens and Candace Owens LLC, her company, are doing business through Facebook. They're trying to sell her book on Facebook, and by slapping that fake news hoax thingy on her Facebook page, they're making it harder for her to do business through her Facebook page. By allegedly wrongly labeling her posts as false or as hoaxes, they got her demonetized on Facebook, costing her, I don't know how much she was making a month, but costing her substantial loss of revenue. And then we get into count 3, which is sort of similar to the idea of parasitism, unfair competition. Count 3, unfair competition at common law brought by both plaintiffs against both defendants. Plaintiffs had a reasonable expectancy of entering into and continuing a valid business relationship with Facebook and various advertisers through Facebook. This expectancy was reasonable because it was based upon a contract and history of prior dealing between Facebook and Candace Owens LLC, whereby plaintiffs would publish content on Facebook and Facebook through various advertisers would compensate plaintiffs plaintiffs. The defendants wrongfully interfered with this expectancy by leveraging their power as Facebook third-party fact-checking partners to place false or misleading information warning labels on Candace's posts for the purposes of redirecting web traffic away from Candace and directing it to their respective websites. By such a scheme, the defendants sought to increase their numbers of clicks and advertising revenue by commandeering plaintiffs' large Facebook following, enhance their status on the internet, and enhance their relationship with Facebook as third-party fact-checking partners. Defendants' actions were unfair because they prevented plaintiffs from legitimately earning revenue from Facebook, as well as from enhanced goodwill, book sales, and other publication opportunities, speaking and teaching, and other business relationships. And the last two counts are defamation with actual malice and defamation with common law malice, and we need to prove malice because Candace Owens is a public figure, and let's just read 2 paragraphs from both of those counts. Lead Story's April 1 article imputes specific charges of conduct to plaintiffs, including but not limited to A. Intentionally spreading a lie, B. Receiving advertising revenue from spreading misinformation on the internet, and 3. Attempting to, quote, downplay the severity, end quote, of a deadly worldwide pandemic. Lead Story's April 1 article is capable of a defamatory meaning because when read by a reasonable reader in context, the aforementioned specific charges of conduct tend to, in no particular order, A. Subject plaintiffs to hatred, ridicule, and contempt, B. Diminish plaintiff's standing in the community, and C. Denigrate plaintiff's fitness for her occupation at PragerU and as a media commentator. Lead Story's April 1 article is defamatory per se because it is defamatory on its face without any reference to outside material. And it is effectively the exact same argument mutatis mutandis for the defamation with common law malice. Now let's just go to the conclusions before we wind this entire thing up. Wherefore, plaintiffs respectfully pray, A. That judgment be entered against the defendants jointly and severally for substantial compensatory damages in an amount to be determined at trial. B. That Lead Stories be held liable for the reputational harm it has caused plaintiff. C. That judgment be entered against the defendants for punitive damages in an amount to be determined at trial. D. That plaintiffs recover pre- and post-judgment interest. E. That plaintiffs recover their reasonable attorney's fees and expenses from the defendants. F. That trial by jury on all issues so triable. G. That all costs of this action be taxed to the defendant. And H. That the court grant all such other and further relief that the court deems just and proper, including equitable relief. That is the lawsuit, and it is a fascinating lawsuit to read, and it's going to be fascinating to follow. My prediction is that this will survive any motion to dismiss in the event that one is presented, although they always seem to be presented, but this will survive a motion to dismiss because the requisite allegations are there. Will this ever get to trial? I suspect not. I suspect this will settle either privately or publicly, and I strongly suspect that as part of that settlement, Facebook will remonetize Candace Owens' Facebook page. But if there's only one takeaway from this lawsuit, it should be that the fact-checking industry is a corrupt and incestuous industry in which the fact-checkers have financial interests in their own fact-checking, and that tends to corruption. The so-called third-party fact-checkers are really more partners than third parties, and when they stand to financially benefit from accurate or inaccurate fact-checking, that will tend to have an effect on their fact-checking. Alright, so that is the vlog. The car is frosting over, and I may have to find another plan for winter, because I don't think vlogging in the car in the dead of winter is going to be a viable plan, but we'll see. With that said and done, if you like my videos and you like my content, please be sure to like, share, subscribe, hit the notification bell, drop a comment in the comment section below because it feeds the algorithm.
More.
If you want to support the channel, all of the support links are in the pinned comment. We've got PayPal, Patreon, subscribe to our YouTube membership. We've got merch. I am on Rumble. By the way, everybody follow me on Rumble. Watch my content on Rumble if you want to break away from YouTube. If you want to watch Robert Barnes and I, we have a locals page, vivabarneslaw.locals.com. You can check us out and support us there. But more important than any of that, take care of yourselves, check in on friends and family, make sure everyone around you is doing well, and now you know your vlog. Peace out.